Hey there, how's it going everyone? In this video, we're going to be building a simple to-do list application using Python and Flask framework. So let's look at the template we're going to be using for this. So I'm using a build template. So we're having our Bootstrap and main CSS file as well as our index.html file. Let's take a look at the index.html file we're going to be building upon. So we are having simple form, and this simple form is going to render dummy tasks, and then you can be able to also perform some tasks on those. So these tasks are maybe deleting and then setting the complete status to true. So let's get into working this, and then we also see that we keep track of our complete tasks. So let's get started building this. So I'm going to go back to our Visual Studio Code, and the first thing I'm going to do is to create a virtual environment and say Python -m and pm and pmv. So this is going to create our virtual environment, and after we've created this virtual environment, the next thing is going to be to install required dependencies in this. So let's wait for it to install the required dependencies to let's wait for our virtual environment to complete creating, and then we add our dependencies to it. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to access it, to activate it. So I'm going to activate the virtual environment source env. Then you're going to use scripts and then activate. After activating the virtual environment, we're going to install Flask. After installing Flask, we are going to create our server. So to do that, I'm going to create a simple file called app. Okay? And it is from this file that we're going to create our Flask instance as well as our server. Let me first close our terminal for now. I'm going to create our app instance. So I'm going to import the Flask class. So I'm going to say from Flask import Flask. And then after that, we're going to create our app instance. So I'm going to say for at app going to be Flask, and then pass in the import name, which is going to be the name of this script. And then after passing this the import name, we are going to create our first route. So let's create our first route as app.route. Then this is going to take us to the index route or the root route. After doing this, we're going to create our view function. So this view function is going to be our index function, and then just simply going to return a string of hello world. After doing this, we are going to run our server. So I'm going to say if underscore name is equal to underscore main. Oh, sorry for this. So this is also going to be a string. So once we do this, we're going to run this. So we're going to say app.run, then we're going to say debug true. So I'm going to save this and then run our file. So I'm going to say python app.py, and this is going to run our file, and it's going to run our Python file at localhost 5000. So I'm going to open that up. So let me just open another tab and open it up at localhost 5000. So you see our hello world being displayed on the browser. So the next thing is going to be to render our template, which is this template index.html. So with Flask, in order for us to render a template or to render an HTML file, we use the render template function, and we also have to put our HTML file within a template folder. So first of all, let's first create a template folder. So I'm going to create a template folder and call it templates. So I'm going to move it. I'm going to move our index.html file within the template folder. Also, I'm going to import render template. So I'm going to import render template. So this is going to be render template, and then to render in the template, I'm going to close this for now. We are going to render our template, so I'm going to render template as index.html. So what this will do is to look into our templates folder, be able to look for the index.html file and then return it to the browser. So after saving this, we need to come and refresh. After refreshing this, we're going to see that our template is going to be rendered. And since the stylings are already working, so we have the server can be able to locate the static files. So in this case, we do not have the need to be able to make use of URL for. In this case, we can be able to locate our static files. Even when you go to the server, it's showing you that it's able to get the static files. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to be able to add a task as well as to dynamically render this test from the database. So to do that, we shall need a database. So in this case, we're going to use the SQLite database. And this SQLite database is a file. So have to specify where we are going to locate this file within our folder. So to do this, I'm going to make use of the OS module within Python. And then after that, I'm going to configure the database URL. And after, I'm going to use SQLAlchemy as the object relational mapper. That's going to help me to create the database model that we're going to use to model our tasks. So to do that, I'm going to come and I'm going to install Flask-SQLAlchemy. So I'm going to stop this server. And after this, stopping this server, I'm going to install SQLAlchemy. So I'm going to save pip install. This is going to be Flask and SQLAlchemy. And after doing that, we shall create our model. And after creating that model, it's going to model our database table as well as to model our different fields that we shall have in our table. So to do that, we are going to import SQLAlchemy. So I'm going to go right at the top of this code. So let's first wait for it to install and installing. I'm going to come right here and say from Flask SQLAlchemy. I'm going to import the SQLAlchemy class. And after importing the SQLAlchemy class, the next thing is going to be to specify where we want our database to be, as well as create our database, our DB instance. So I'm going to come and create this DB instance just down here, DB SQLAlchemy, and then we shall pass in our app. And after doing this, this is showing that SQLAlchemy is going to work with our app. So after doing this, we are going to specify where we want our database to be. We're going to come right here and say app.config. And within this config dictionary, we shall set the key as SQL database URI. And this is going to be, we're going to use SQLite. So we are going to specify that the database is going to be SQLite. And then the next thing we're going to do is to specify where on our file system we want our SQLite file. So in this case, we want this file to be here. So we are going to use OS. So I'm going to say os.path.join. So this function helps us to join two URLs. We're going to join the root path of our application, our app.py, and the file that we want to create as our SQLite file. This is going to be os.path.join, and within the app variable, we can be able to access the root path variable, which stands for the path in which our app is. So then we shall connect it to that. We shall join it with our SQLite file. So we're going to call this, let's say, todos.db. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to run our app and see if our server is running without errors. So you need to run this with Python. After running this, we are going to see a huge warning here being displayed every time the server reloads. So we're going to fix this by setting SQLAlchemy track modifications to false. I'm going to copy this. And after copying it, I'm going to come and say app.config. I'm going to set the key as SQLAlchemy track modifications. Then I'm going to set this to false. After setting this to false, we are going to reload our server. And this time we shall not see that warning. So after doing that, I'm going to close this for now. And after doing that, the next step is going to be to create our database model. So we've been able to create our database URL, been able to create our database instance. Now the next thing is going to be to create a database model. So to do that, I'm going to just first close that. So I'm going to come and create our class. So this class is going to be our task class, and it's going to inherit from db. But for now, let's just pass it and think of what we're going to create. So I'm going to come just slightly above here. I'm going to just create a comment, and this. So we're going to model our task in the database. So our task class is going to have, let's say, an ID, and we're going to have a name. Also going to have, let's say, a complete status. So that means that we're going to be able to keep track of our task, whether it's complete or not. So this is going to be a boolean, and then our name in this case is going to be a string. We are also going to set our ID as an integer. So let's go ahead and implement this using SQLAlchemy. So we need to come within our task model. The first thing we shall need is the ID. So ID is going to be db dot colon. So this is going to be our colon. Then we're going to set this to an integer. Then we shall say that the primary key, in this case, is going to be equal to true. This means that our ID is going to be the unique identifier for each row in our database. So after doing this, we're going to set the name of the task to a string. So we're going to say db.colon. This is going to be db.colon. db dot is going to be string. And then after that, you can specify the number of characters or the number of digits or the number of the length of the string that you may want to use. So in this case, I won't specify it since we are using SQLite. So I'll also set nullable false to show that we do not want this column to be null. So say nullable is false. So this is going to be false. After doing this, we are going to also add our complete. So I need to come and say complete is going to be equal to db dot colon. This is going to be db.colon and db dot. This is going to be our boolean. So it's going to be a boolean, and this boolean is going to have a default of false. So by default, you are going to have every task set to false, so that we'll be able to set it to complete on our to-do list on the front end. So we're also going to create a simple function that's going to return string representations. We're going to say def. So these string representations are going to be the representations of whatever objects we shall create out of our model. So we need to create this, and then we're going to pass in self. Then it's just going to simply return the string representation of each task. So I'm going to say task, and then we shall, since we're using f strings, I'm going to say f, and then this is going to be self dot, and this is going to be name. So just set it for now like this, and after doing this, I'm going to just come down here. So everything is fine. The next thing is going to be to create our database out of this model. So to do that, I'm going to open up the terminal, and after doing this, I'm just going to say Python, and I'm going to import the DB instance as well as our model class. So to do this, I'm going to say from app, which is our module we are working in. We're going to import the SQLAlchemy instance, which is DB, as well as our model. So our model in this case is going to be the task model. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to call create all, which is going to create all this model and transfer it into a database table in our database. So let's go ahead and do this. So I'll just come and say db create all. After this is done, we don't have any errors, which means our database has been created. Now, since SQLite databases are files, when I go and check, it's going to show us the file todos.db, just as we specified within our database URI configuration. So this means that we've created our database. Now, to confirm whether our database is having this table with these attributes, I'm going to open it up using the extension I have installed. So I'm going to come and right click, so say open database. So this is going to open up my SQLite Explorer. So I'm going to open up to do's.dp, and you have our task, and you see that you have an ID, a name, a complete boolean. So I'm going to close this for now. I'm going to minimize this and also get out of the Python shell for now. So after doing this, I'm going to run our server and check if we don't have any errors. Now, as this is running, we are going to first minimize that for now. Now, the next task we have is to dynamically create. We're going to be able to create these items or these tasks from our front end. And to do that, we're going to make the use of this form that we have on the front end. So to do that, I'm going to open up our template file, which is index.html. I'm going to go to that index.html file. Then we're going to go to that form. Now the form has no action for now, so we'll have to add the action. So to add the action, we want that action to be within our. So we're going to create a route specific to adding a specific task to the database. So let's do that. So we're going to come and say app dot route, and now this route is going to specifically add. So let's say add is going to be add, and then we have to specify that it's going to work with a post method. We're going to say that method in this case is going to be post method. So we add a list of method and we specify that the method is going to be post. So after doing that, we are going to define a view function that's going to contain all the logic specific to adding this task to the database. So to do that, I'm going to come and say def create task. After doing this, we are going to simply get all the data from the front end. So we're going to say that our task is going to be equal to request dot form dot get. So basically, this helps us to get the form attribute that stands for that specific form field we want to get information from. In this case, when we submit this form, have a field named as the task. So we want to access the name attribute, which is task, and then we access it using request.form, and then we specify name that you want to pass in. So in this case, the name is task. After doing that, we are going to basically just create a new instance of the task class, and then we specify the task as equal to the task. Now, since our complete is set to false by default, we do not mind this for now. What we shall actually do is to just update it. So to do this, I'm just going to say new task going to be equal to a task, and then in this case, we're going to just create a new task with a name. So if we look at our task class, we have this attribute called name. So we're just going to add that name attribute as the task we get from the front end. And then what you're going to do is to add it to the session and then commit it to the database. Let's say db.session.add. So this is going to be our new task. And then we're going to add it to the database by saying db.session.commit. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to simply return and redirect to that specific route where we have added it. To do that, I'm just going to say return, redirect, and then we're going to redirect to slash. But now we haven't yet imported redirect, so I'm going to go up now code and import redirect from Flask. So I'm going to say from Flask import redirect. And after doing that, the next thing is going to be to try out this. So I'm going to go to our index.html. Now there are two ways I can be able to specify the action. I can just come and add the URL. So say slash add. This will work. So let's try it. So if I go to our index route, I can be able to see that I can add. So let's say to go to school. So if I add this task, I can be able to add it to the database. And now request is not defined, so I'm going to import that. So let me go and import it. So I'm going to import request. So we'll be able to access the form data using the request object, and I had forgotten to import it. So I refresh, so I'm going to continue resubmitting this form, and then it's going to redirect, meaning that it has successfully added this to the database. So to do this, I'm going to come back to our tasks and be able to dynamically render them to be able to see if we've created a task in our database. So let's go ahead and be able to query for all the tasks. So I'm going to order them by their ID in descending order so that you see the last task that we added on top. So to do that, I'm going to create a variable. Variable is going to be tasks, and then tasks is going to be, let's say, task dot query dot. In this case, it's going to be dot. We're going to use the order by function, and then we specify what we want to order by with. So in this case, we want to order by the ID. So I'm going to say task dot ID, and then we want to order them in the descending order. So I'll say dot descending, and then what I want is say for all of the tasks. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to specify those tasks within our index.html, our render function. So our render template function is going to take in this task. So I'm going to say tasks is going to be tasks we created. So after doing this, I'm going to just come right in our index.html and going to select this task. So we have our div with a class of tasks. So this is what is containing all our tasks. So we are going to render this dynamically from our database. So I'm going to first minimize this and then move them. So after removing them, I am going to come just dynamically render them. So I'm going to use a for loop that's going to simply iterate all over all the tasks in our database. So I'm going to come and cut this. I'm going to use a for loop. So I'm going to say for tasks. So what I'm going to do is to just paste in one task and then dynamically get the data of that task. So I'm going to come and say, so what you want here is the task name. So I'll say task dot name, and then what you have here is a section having a delete. So in this case, we have this button of btn danger style with Bootstrap, and another btn with warning that's supposed to be able to check for our and complete a task. So we are having FontAwesome icons that are not being rendered, but before we look into that, let's first see if our task is being rendered. So if I save this, I'm going to come refresh. So when we refresh, we see that our task is now being rendered. So now let's take care of these icons. These icons are not being rendered. So to display these icons, I'm going to come and stop our server, Ctrl C. And then I'm going to install an extension that helps us to work with FontAwesome icons for Flask. So to do that, I'm going to say pip install Flask FontAwesome. This is going to install Flask FontAwesome within our virtual environment. And once this is done, we are going to run our server again. So I'm going to say python app.py. And after doing this, the next thing I'm going to do is to just I'm going to create the instance for FontAwesome with our app. So I'm going to come to the top here, and then I'm going to say from Flask FontAwesome. I'm going to import the FontAwesome class. So I'm going to say FontAwesome. So this is going to be FontAwesome. And after importing FontAwesome, the next thing is going to be to create the instance for us to help FontAwesome to work with our app. We need to come and say FA is going to be equal to FontAwesome. Then place in our app. After doing this, we are going to come to our template file. Then we're just going to put a link to our FontAwesome. So to do that, instead of putting a link that points straight to our FontAwesome files, we're instead going to just put a tag, and this is going to be using Ginger. So we're going to say awesome, and then this is going to be HTML. So I'm going to save this, and when I refresh, you see that our icons are now being shown. So after doing this, we can be able to try with other. Let's say I'm going to add another task, which is visit grandpa. And when I add this, we see that another task has been added. So let us also add another one. So if I say buy some groceries, this is also going to be added. And when it's added, we are now having many tasks in our database. The next thing we're going to take care of is the number of complete tasks. So let's go back to our code. I'm going to go to app.py, and then within our index route, I'm going to get the number of complete tasks. So I'm going to say complete tasks going to be equal to. So I need to query for all tasks, and then specifically filter out those tasks that are complete. In this case, I'm going to say task query filter by. In this case, I want to filter by those that are complete. So I'm going to set to filter by those that have their complete attribute equal to true. Then this I want all of them, I'll say dot all. But if I wanted, like, let me say one, I could say dot first. So I'll then come within our render template and then specify it as also an argument. So I'll say complete task is equal to complete tasks. When I save this, I'm going to go back to the template. When I go to the template, I'm going to come and say complete tasks, and then set the complete tasks to complete tasks. So I'm going to save this. So when I refresh, we see that our number of complete tasks has been returned as a list. So let's try to see. So I have a list. So what it did is actually return a list. So in our code, we are actually supposed to say that we wanted the number of complete tasks. So fix this, I'm just going to call that count. This is going to return the number of complete tasks. After returning the number of complete tasks, we are going to have our complete tasks as 0. Now the next task we're going to implement is completing these tasks, because this is supposed to give us an indication that task is complete. So to do that, you're going to come and I'm going to first close that. So after doing that, I'm going to implement another route that completes a task. But before I do that, let me first implement some conditional logic to show that if a task is complete, it should be shown with another icon, and if it's not, it should be also shown by another icon. So I'm going to copy this icon. So I'm going to copy this anchor tag and actually going to cut it. After cutting it, I'll put an if statement. So if the task is complete, so in this case we shall have just the task complete. If it's true, we shall be having our anchor tag, but in this case we want to set the class warning to class. We shall set it to class success in case it's complete. Now if you're wondering which classes these are Bootstrap classes, and I'm simply changing these Bootstrap classes to show that if a task is complete, it should show a button with the class of success, and if it's not complete, then I'm just going to write a simple else statement here. Then this is going to be let's say this is going to be the anchor tag but with another class. So let's say it's going to be the class of warning, just like you see around here. So after doing that, I'm going to come and work on the URL that I'm going to put within this href. So let's say the URL is going to be complete slash the task ID. So I'm going to put in the task ID. So in this case, it's going to be task ID. So after doing this, so what I'm going to do is to test this route. So I'm going to go to my browser. So I'm going to go to my Chrome, and then I'm going to refresh. After refreshing, I'm going to try to click on this. So we're saying that this is not found. So after doing this, I'm going to implement this route. So I'm going to go to app.py. then create this route. So I'm going to say app dot route. Then I will say slash complete. So this is going to be complete, and then you're going to get the integer ID of that specific task. You're going to get an ID which is going to be an integer, and then we are going to create a view function that's going to help us to mark a task as complete. So I'm going to create it. So I'm going to say def complete task. So this is going to be a complete task. So this is going to basically complete the task. So it's going to take in the ID of that task, and then we shall query for that specific item we want to complete from the database. So I'm saying task is going to be, so let's say task 2. Let's say task to update. So this is going to be the task we want to update to complete. So we're going to query it by using its ID. So we shall say task.query.get. Then we shall pass in the ID of that task. So I'll say ID. After doing that, the next thing is going to be to set the complete attribute to true. So I'll say task update dot. So we're going to set the attribute of complete. So we shall say complete is equal to true. Now keep in mind that this complete attribute comes as false. So when you look into our model, see that this attribute is set as false. So I'm going to set this to true. And after doing that, we are going to simply uh, save this to the database. So I'm going to say db.session.commit. Now this is going to save it to the database. And after doing that, we shall just want to redirect to our root URL. So after doing this, we going to save. So when we go back and we try to go back to our applications, so I'm going to refresh, and after refreshing, when we mark a task as complete, we expect that it should be marked as complete, but saying not found. So let's try to fix that. So we don't have a forward slash on our ID, on our URL, and Flask takes care of this. It complains about it when you don't put forward slashes and then specify that those forward slashes are within our URLs. So let's try that URL again. So if I say slash, so if I put in task.id slash, then I also do the same this side, say slash id slash. So if I come and refresh and then set the task to complete, you see that the icon changes, showing us that this task is now set to complete. So let's try to also implement a route that's going to help us to delete this, these tasks. So to do that, I'm going to also do the same. I'm going to access a task by its ID. And then after accessing the task by its ID, we shall query it from the database and then delete it. So I need to go to index.html, and after doing this, I will do the href, just add that URL. So in this case, I'm going to call it delete slash, and this is going to be the task ID. So it's going to be the task ID. After adding this task ID, next thing is going to be to create a route that uses this URL. So I'm going to come and create that. So I'm going to say app.route. Then I'm going to pass in, this is going to be a task. So it's going to be delete slash the task ID. So in this case, it's going to be, let's say it's going to be the int ID. So sorry for this. This is going to be the ID. It's going to be an integer in this case. After doing that, I'm just going to come and say def delete task. So we shall access it by its ID. I'm going to query this. So I'll say task to delete. It's going to be task. Going to be very similar to how we got it when updating it to complete. So this is going to be task.query get, then we shall pass in the ID. After doing this, we shall just delete it. So we shall say db.session.delete, and we shall pass in the task to delete. Let me correct this. So it's going to be task to delete. Then we shall save it to the database. So we shall say db.session.delete, and then we have to just redirect to the same page that we made this request from. So after doing this, I'm going to come and try to test this route. So I'm going to refresh. So let's try deleting the first tab, first task that we added. So if I say go to school, delete. So we have in delete takes in a positional argument, the instance. Let's try to fix that. So I have db.session.delete. This was supposed to actually be db.session.delete. So let's try that. So if I go back and try to delete a task, so we see that in this case, the task has been deleted and we have been able to implement that. So let's try deleting all tasks, being able to delete all tasks. So if we add another task, we can be able to add multiple tasks, set tasks to complete, as well as to delete other tasks. So in this video, we've been able to see how we can be able to create a simple to-do list application using the Flask framework. Like this video, please go ahead and leave a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content. And I'll be doing a lot to help you guys learn programming while creating projects. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.